Natasha Wells knelt among the experimental hybrid plants in Greenhouse 7, her fingers gently coaxing a stubborn earth orchid to bloom alongside its alien companion. The Serenity Station's botanical labs had become her sanctuary over the past 6 months, a place where the delicate work of growing things provided welcome relief from the tense, diplomatic negotiations happening throughout the facility. The peace talks between Earth and the Celestial Alliance had been ongoing for nearly a year, with both sides carefully testing the waters of potential cooperation. Natasha's role as botanical engineer was supposedly secondary to the main negotiations, but she knew her work was crucial. If their species were to coexist peacefully, they needed to understand how their life forms could thrive together. "The symphonic resonance is still off," came a melodic voice behind her. Speaking in accented but perfect English, Natasha turned to find Zephyr standing in the doorway, his tall, willowy frame catching the soft grow lights in a way that made his naturally luminescent skin shimmer with subtle rainbows. Like all members of his species, the Luminians, he possessed an otherworldly beauty that seemed almost too delicate for the harsh realities of space travel. "I've been adjusting the harmonic frequencies all morning," Natasha replied, standing and wiping her soil-stained hands on her work apron. "The earth plants seem to respond well to your people's biorhythms, but finding the perfect balance is complex," Zephyr finished, moving closer to examine her work. Like most worthwhile endeavors, over the months Natasha had grown accustomed to Zephyr's presence in her lab. As the Luminian cultural liaison, he was supposed to observe and report on human scientific methods. What had started as professional curiosity, however, had evolved into something neither of them had expected. "Your orchid is beginning to sing," Zephyr said softly, his large, opalescent eyes focused on the delicate flower. "Can you hear it?" Natasha listened carefully. 2 human ears. There was only the gentle hum of the environmental systems and the soft rustle of leaves. But she had learned that Zephyr's species could perceive frequencies far beyond human range. "I can't hear it the way you do," she admitted, "but I can feel something, a kind of contentment." Zephyr's expression brightened. Literally, his skin pulsed with warm golden light when he was pleased. "Yes, you are learning to sense beyond your normal parameters. This is remarkable progress." Their hands brushed as they both reached to adjust the plant's support structure, and Natasha felt that familiar electric thrill that had nothing to do with static electricity and everything to do with the growing attraction she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "Zephyr," she said carefully, "are you supposed to be spending this much time in the human sections of the station?" His luminescence dimmed slightly, the Luminian equivalent of a blush. "The cultural exchange protocols are somewhat flexible in their interpretation. And your people, what do they think about you working so closely with a human?" Zephyr was quiet for a moment, his fingers gently stroking one of the hybrid plant's leaves when he spoke. His voice carried notes of uncertainty she'd never heard before. "My people value harmony above all else," he said. "For centuries, we have believed that such harmony could only exist among our own kind. The idea that a Luminian could find resonance with someone of another species is difficult for them to accept." "Resonance," Natasha repeated. "Is that what this is?" She gestured between them, acknowledging for the first time the connection that had been growing stronger with each passing day. Zephyr's entire being seemed to shimmer with nervous energy. "On my world, when 2 Luminians find their life song complementing each other, we call it resonance. It is the foundation of all our bonds, romantic, familial, communal. And you feel that with me?" Natasha asked, her heart racing. "From the first day, you showed me how earth plants respond to gentle touch rather than harmonic manipulation," Zephyr said, moving closer. "Your approach to nurturing life is so different from ours, yet so beautiful. You speak to growing things with your hands, your patience, your dedication. In my language, there is a word, Kithara, which means one who sings to the silent. It describes someone who can coax beauty from the most unlikely places." Natasha felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever described her work in such poetic terms. "My people would say I'm just stubborn," she said with a shaky laugh. "That I spend too much time alone with plants instead of people. Perhaps that is why you could hear the orchid song," Zephyr said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "You have been learning to listen with more than your ears." The greenhouse fell silent except for the gentle circulation of air and the barely audible hum of growing things finding their rhythm together. Natasha found herself studying Zephyr's face, noting how his skin patterns shifted and flowed like aurora borealis, revealing emotions his words might never express. "The negotiations," she said finally. "If our people knew about this, I know." Zephyr replied, "The peace talks are fragile. Some on both sides would use any excuse to abandon the process. So what do we do?" Zephyr reached out tentatively, his luminous fingers hovering just above Natasha's hand. "May I?" She nodded, and when their skin made contact, she gasped. It wasn't just the warmth or the slight tingle of his bioelectric field. It was something deeper, a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. "We continue our work," Zephyr said, his voice steady despite the wonder in his eyes. "We prove that different species can not only coexist but thrive together. Like your orchid and our resonance crystal." Natasha looked at the hybrid plant they'd been tending, now glowing with a soft, steady light that spoke of perfect harmony between two very different life forms. "And if someone asks why we're spending so much time together," Zephyr smiled, and his whole being radiated warmth, "we tell them the truth that the most beautiful things in the universe grow when different elements learn to support each other instead of competing." As if summoned by their conversation, the greenhouse door chimed with an incoming message. The holographic display showed Ambassador Williams, the lead human negotiator, requesting Natasha's presence at tomorrow's crucial meeting about resource sharing. "They want my botanical assessment for the terraforming proposals," Natasha said, reading the message. "And they will want mine as well," Zephyr replied. "The Luminian Council values my observations about human scientific methods." They stood there for a moment, hands still touching, both aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges and possibly new scrutiny of their relationship. "Whatever happens," Natasha said, squeezing his luminous fingers gently, "I'm glad we found each other." "As am I," Zephyr replied, "in my language. We have a saying, the garden grows strongest when tended by many hands. Perhaps our peoples will learn this truth as well." As the artificial day cycle began its transition to evening, Natasha and Zephyr continued their work side by side. To gardeners from different worlds discovering that love, like the most resilient plants, could take root in the most unexpected soil. Diego Rivera floated in the zero-gravity communication bay of the human transport vessel Harmony, his fingers dancing across holographic controls as he fine-tuned the deep space relay systems. 3 months into the cultural exchange mission, he had become the primary link between the human and Luminian fleets, ensuring that messages flowed smoothly between the two groups of ships traveling information toward the neutral meeting point. His official title was Communications Specialist, but Diego preferred to think of himself as a translator of intentions. Every message that passed through his station carried more than words. It carried hopes, fears, and the delicate threads of trust being woven between two species. Tonight's transmission schedule included the usual diplomatic correspondence, scientific data exchanges, and crew welfare reports. But Diego found himself looking forward to one particular signal that wasn't on any official manifest. At exactly 2200 ship time, his personal receiver chimed with an incoming message on a frequency he'd discovered weeks ago, a channel the Luminians used for what they called Harmony broadcasts, personal communications that carried emotional resonance along with words. "Hello, Diego," came the voice that had become the highlight of his days. Melody's words arrived wrapped in musical tones that seemed to paint colors in the air around him. "I hope your day cycle has been filled with pleasant discoveries." Diego smiled as he activated his own transmitter, knowing that his response would travel across the void between their ships in a matter of seconds, yet feeling the distance keenly. "Hello, Melody," he said into his headset. "Every day brings something new. Today I learned that your people's navigation songs can actually help our computers plot more efficient courses. Our engineering team is fascinated." There was a pause, filled with the subtle harmonics that indicated Melody was composing her thoughts. As one of the Luminian harmony weavers, She experienced communication as a form of art, crafting each response to carry both meaning and beauty. Your people's approach to problem-solving continues to surprise us, she replied, her voice carrying undertones of admiration, where we seek to blend with the universe's natural flows. You seek to understand and improve upon them. Both approaches have merit. These conversations had begun accidentally. 3 weeks ago, Diego had been testing the communication arrays when he picked up what seemed like random musical transmissions from the Luminian fleet. Curious, he had traced the source and discovered that they were personal messages between crew members. But unlike human communications, they were layered with emotional content that standard translators couldn't interpret. Fascinated by the complexity, he had spent hours learning to decode the harmonic structures. When he finally attempted to respond using similar patterns, the reaction from the Luminian ship had been immediate and intense. Most of the harmony weavers had been shocked that a human could even attempt their communication methods. Melody had been different. Instead of alarm, she had expressed delight at his clumsy but sincere efforts to speak in her musical language. Diego, Melody's voice brought him back to the present. I have been wondering about something. Your people form individual bonds with specific partners, yes? Not communal harmonies like my species. Diego felt his heart rate increase. Over their weeks of conversation, their exchanges had grown increasingly personal, but this was the first time Melody had directly addressed the romantic undertones that had been developing between them. We do form pair bonds, he said carefully, though humans also value friendships, families, and communities. But yes, when we find someone special, we often choose to build our lives around that connection. And do you? Have you found such a connection? Melody's voice carried notes of vulnerability that made Diego wish he could reach across space to comfort her. I think I might be finding one now, he said, his own voice growing softer. Though I never expected it to happen like this, talking to someone I've never seen, whose hand I've never held. Melody's response came wrapped in harmonies so beautiful that Diego felt tears prick his eyes. In our culture, we believe that true harmony begins in the spirit before it manifests in the physical realm. Perhaps what we are building transcends such limitations. Tell me about yourself, Melody, Diego said. Not about harmony weaving or your duties on the ship. Tell me about you. There was a long pause, filled with what Diego had learned to recognize as Melody's thinking music, soft, contemplative tones that helped her organize her thoughts. I am considered unusual among my people, she began. Most harmony weavers focus on maintaining the collective consciousness that binds our crews together. But I have always been drawn to the spaces between the harmonies, the individual notes, that create beauty precisely because they stand apart from the whole. That sounds lonely, Diego said gently. It was until I began speaking with you. Your communications carry such distinct personality. Each message feels uniquely yours in a way that fascinated me. Luminians often blend our individual voices into collective expressions, but you remain gloriously, stubbornly yourself in everything you say. Diego laughed, a sound that carried through the transmission and seemed to delight Melody, whose response came wrapped in bright, cheerful harmonies. Is that a compliment or a criticism? It is wonder, Melody replied, and perhaps attraction. Your language has words for this that ours lacks. We speak of harmonic resonance, but you speak of love, affection, desire. These concepts intrigue me. They intrigue you, or they apply to what you're feeling. Another pause, longer this time, when Melody spoke again. Her voice carried new harmonics that Diego couldn't interpret, but somehow understood. Diego Rivera, of the human vessel harmony, I believe I am experiencing what you would call falling in love. Is this possible between beings who have never shared physical space? Diego's breath caught. Over the weeks of their conversations, he had been hoping for this moment while simultaneously fearing it. The connection he felt with Melody was stronger than anything he'd experienced with someone he could actually touch. I think it is, he said, because I'm falling in love with you too. Melody of the Luminian vessel star song. With your voice, your mind, your way of finding beauty in everything you encounter. This complicates our mission, Melody said, but her tone carried harmonies of joy rather than concern. Everything worthwhile is complicated, Diego replied. But Melody, our ships will dock at the neutral station in 2 weeks. We'll actually be able to meet in person. I am both eager for and terrified of that moment, she admitted. What if the harmony we have found in words does not translate to physical presence? Then we'll figure it out together, Diego said. Just like we figured out how to understand each other's languages, how to bridge the gap between musical communication and verbal expression. Their conversation was interrupted by an official transmission request from the Luminian flagship. Diego recognized the priority codes that meant Melody was needed for Harmony Weaver duties. I must go, she said regretfully. The evening meditation requires all Harmony Weavers to help maintain the fleet's collective consciousness during sleep cycles. I understand. Melody, yes, whatever happens when we meet in person, I want you to know that these conversations have been the most meaningful part of this entire mission for me, and for me, Diego Rivera, until tomorrow's transmission. Until tomorrow. As the connection closed, Diego floated in the quiet communication bay, surrounded by the gentle hum of machinery and the distant murmur of the ship's crew, going about their evening routines. In 2 weeks, he would finally meet the being whose voice had become the soundtrack to his dreams. The thought filled him with equal parts anticipation and terror. But as he began preparing the next day's official communication schedules, Diego found himself humming, attempting to recreate some of the harmonies Melody wove into her words. Love, it seemed, was teaching him to speak in music. Jasmine Chen stood before the massive transparent wall of the Cultural Exhibition Hall on Serenity Station, her latest painting floating in the zero-gravity display chamber like a window into another dimension. The piece had taken her 3 weeks to complete, using traditional earth oils mixed with luminescent pigments that responded to emotional resonance, a technique she'd developed specifically for this interspecies cultural exchange. It moves, came a voice like crystalline bells behind her. I have never seen static art that contains such dynamic energy. Jasmine turned to find Prism approaching, their form shifting through spectrums of light that most humans could barely perceive. The Luminian artist's body was composed of what appeared to be living energy, constantly flowing and reforming into new patterns of beauty. Even after 2 months of working together on the exhibition, Jasmine still found herself mesmerized by Prism's otherworldly presence. That's the goal, Jasmine said, gesturing toward her painting. I wanted to capture the feeling of change, of growth, of 2 different ways of seeing, learning to complement each other. The painting showed 2 figures, one clearly human, one an interpretation of Luminian form, standing in a garden where earth flowers grew alongside crystalline structures that pulsed with their own inner light. But as viewers moved around it, the perspective shifted, showing new details and relationships between the elements. Your species' ability to create permanent representations of temporal experiences continues to astound me, Prism said. Their form shifting to warm golden hues that Jasmine had learned indicated deep appreciation. In Luminian art, beauty exists only in the moment of creation. We sculpt with light and energy, but our works fade as soon as we stop actively maintaining them. There's beauty in that too, Jasmine replied. Your pieces have an immediacy, a presence that my paintings can't match. When you created that Aurora sculpture last week, everyone who saw it felt different afterward. Prism's form flickered with what Jasmine recognized as pleased embarrassment. Over their weeks of collaboration, she had become fluent in the subtle language of Prism's color changes and energy patterns. Perhaps we could attempt a collaboration, Prism suggested, their voice carrying harmonics of nervous excitement. Your permanence combined with my temporal effects, neither purely human nor Luminian, but something entirely new. Jasmine felt her heart skip. Working with Prism had become the highlight of her days on the station. The Luminian artist approached creation with a philosophy so different from her own, yet somehow perfectly complementary. Where Jasmine planned and structured, Prism flowed and improvised. Where she captured moments in time, they created experiences that lived and breathed. I'd love to try, she said, then hesitated. But Prism, are you sure your people would approve? I know some of the Luminian delegation have concerns about cultural contamination. Prism's form darkened slightly, cycling through deeper blues and purples. There are those who believe that engaging too closely with human creative methods will diminish our natural abilities. They fear that learning to think in your linear, persistent ways will damage our connection to the living moment. And what do you believe? Prism moved closer to Jasmine's painting, their energy field creating subtle interactions with the luminescent pigments. That made the artwork seem to come alive. I believe that art is about finding new ways to express truth and beauty, they said softly, and working with you has shown me truths I never knew existed. The way Prism said it, with their form shifting to the warm amber tones that indicated deep affection, made Jasmine's breath catch. Over the weeks, their professional partnership had evolved into something more personal, more intimate. But she had been uncertain whether Luminians even experienced attraction the way humans did. Prism, she said carefully, when you say I've shown you new truths, what do you mean? The Luminian artist's form stilled, becoming more solid and defined than Jasmine had ever seen it. Among my people, we experience connection through harmony, the blending of energies until individual identity becomes part of a greater whole. But with you, I have discovered something different, a connection that celebrates distinctness rather than dissolving it. Individual connection. Jasmine said, understanding dawning. Like human love, is that what this is? Prism asked, their form brightening with curiosity and hope. This feeling of wanting to create beautiful things together, of finding joy in your unique perspective while maintaining my own. Jasmine stepped closer, drawn by the warmth of Prism's energy field. It sounds like it could be. Prism, I've been falling in love with your mind, your creativity, the way you see beauty in everything around us. And I with yours, Prism replied, their form pulsing with radiant joy. Your persistence, your ability to capture fleeting moments and make them eternal. Your courage in approaching someone so different from yourself. They stood together in the exhibition hall, surrounded by artworks from both their cultures. Jasmine's structured, permanent pieces contrasted beautifully with the flowing, temporary installations that other Luminian artists had contributed. The entire exhibition was a testament to the possibility of finding harmony without sacrificing individual identity. So, Jasmine said, reaching toward Prism's energy form, shall we try that collaboration? I would be honored, Prism replied, extending tendrils of light that intertwined with Jasmine's fingers. The contact sent gentle warmth up her arm, not uncomfortable but definitely alien, definitely wonderful. Over the next several hours, they worked together in a way neither had ever experienced. Jasmine painted with traditional techniques, but Prism wove light through her brush strokes, creating layers of luminescence that responded to viewers' emotions. The result was something unprecedented, a painting that existed both as permanent artwork and as living light sculpture. It's beautiful, whispered Marina Santos, another human artist who had been watching from across the hall. But is it human art or Luminian art? It's something new, Jasmine replied, not taking her eyes off the swirling, evolving masterpiece she and Prism had created. It's collaborative art, partnership art, love art, Prism added, their form glowing with contentment, as they maintained the energy patterns that kept their portion of the piece alive. As word of their collaboration spread through the station, other artists from both species began gathering to observe. Some showed curiosity, others concern, but all were clearly affected by what they saw. This could change everything, whispered a Luminian observer whose form flickered with uncertainty. If art can transcend species boundaries, what else becomes possible? That's the point, Jasmine said, finally turning away from their creation to address the growing crowd. Art has always been about pushing boundaries, exploring new possibilities, showing us what we didn't know was possible. But at what cost? Asked another Luminian, their form darkening with worry. What happens to our traditional forms, our cultural identity? Prism moved to stand beside Jasmine, their combined presence creating new patterns of light and shadow in the hall. Culture grows stronger through exchange, not weaker, they said, their voice carrying unusual authority. Jasmine has not made me less Luminian. She has helped me discover aspects of my creativity I never knew existed. And working with Prism hasn't made me less human, Jasmine added. If anything, It's made me more myself by showing me new ways to express what I've always felt. As the crowd gradually dispersed, some thoughtful, others troubled, Jasmine and Prism remained with their collaborative piece, watching as it continued to evolve and change. So what happens now? Jasmine asked. Our exhibition ends next week. Our ships go to different destinations. Prism's form shimmered with complex emotions. I do not know, but I believe that what we have created, both as artwork and what exists between us, is too beautiful to simply end. Then we figure out how to make it continue, Jasmine said, taking Prism's energy tendrils in her hands once more. Love always finds a way. Together, they watch their impossible creation pulse with life, a testament to the power of two different approaches to beauty learning to dance together. Lucas Park sat at the mediation table in Conference Room Alpha, watching the tension build between the human and Luminian delegations like pressure in a sealed chamber. After 6 months of careful negotiations, everything was beginning to unravel over a single misunderstood gesture during yesterday's cultural ceremony. As a trained conflict mediator, Lucas had dealt with disputes between corporations, governments, and even warring factions. But nothing had prepared him for the complexity of interspecies diplomacy. The problem wasn't just language barriers or cultural differences, it was the fundamental challenge of bridging two entirely different ways of experiencing reality. The humans showed deliberate disrespect, declared High Resonator Scythe, their crystalline form pulsing with agitated reds and oranges. They remained silent during the harmony of welcome, refusing to participate in our sacred communion of voices. Ambassador Williams, leading the human delegation, spread her hands in frustration. We explained that humans can't produce the harmonic frequencies your ceremony requires. Our vocal cords simply aren't capable of those ranges. Capability is not the issue, Scythe responded, their light patterns growing more erratic. Intent is. Your people could have attempted participation, shown respect through effort even if the result was imperfect. Instead, you stood in judgmental silence. Lucas felt the familiar weight of a mediation session gone wrong. Both sides had valid points, but they were talking past each other, each interpreting the other's actions through their own cultural lens. If I may, he interjected gently, I think we need to step back and examine what each side was actually trying to communicate. Yesterday, as he spoke, Lucas noticed a new figure entering the chamber. Echo, one of the Luminian empaths who had been assigned to monitor the emotional atmosphere of the negotiations. Like all members of their subspecies, Echo's form was more fluid than other Luminians, constantly shifting in response to the feelings they sensed around them. When Echo's luminous gaze met his, Lucas felt an unexpected jolt of recognition. They had worked together several times over the past weeks, and each interaction had left him more intrigued by this being who seemed to experience emotions as tangible forces. The pain is intense in here, Echo said softly, their form cycling through deep blues and purples as they absorbed the distress radiating from both delegations. Both sides feel misunderstood, unappreciated. The humans experience shame at their perceived inadequacy. The Luminians feel rejection of something sacred to their identity. Lucas nodded, grateful for Echo's insight. Thank you. That's exactly what we need to address, not just what happened, but how it made everyone feel over the next hour. Lucas guided both sides through a careful unpacking of the previous day's events. The harmony of welcome was indeed sacred to Luminians, a ceremony where voices blended to create collective consciousness. To them, silence during such a moment felt like rejection of unity itself. But humans, Lucas explained, showed respect through different means. Standing quietly during a ceremony they couldn't participate in was actually their way of honoring something beyond their abilities. So when we remained silent, Ambassador Williams said slowly, you interpreted it as dismissal. And when you expected us to attempt your harmonics, added Dr. Peterson from the human cultural team. We worried that our inadequate efforts would seem mocking. Echo's form brightened to warm golds and greens as the emotional atmosphere in the room began to shift. The misunderstanding creates a feedback loop, they observed. Fear of giving offense leads to actions that cause the very offense you wish to avoid. Exactly, Lucas said. then found himself looking directly at Echo with admiration. "You have remarkable insight into emotional dynamics." Echo's form shimmered with what Lucas was learning to recognize as pleased surprise. "Your mediation techniques fascinate me. You don't just resolve conflicts, you transform them into opportunities for deeper understanding." Their eyes met across the mediation table, and Lucas felt that strange flutter of connection he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. Echo was not just beautiful in their alien way, but possessed a depth of emotional intelligence that drew Lucas like gravity. "Perhaps," High Resonator Scythe said, interrupting Lucas's momentary distraction, "we could establish new protocols that honor both approaches to respect." The next 2 hours were productive, with both sides working toward compromise. But Lucas found himself increasingly aware of Echo's presence, the way their form responded to the emotional currents in the room, how their insights helped bridge gaps that words alone couldn't cross. During a recess, Lucas found Echo alone on the observation deck, their form cycling through contemplative silver patterns as they looked out at the stars. "That was impressive work in there," Lucas said, joining them at the viewport. "As was yours," Echo replied. "But Lucas, I must confess something. My ability to sense emotions has revealed something unexpected." "What do you mean?" Echo's form shifted to warmer tones, shot through with nervous flickers. "I can feel what you feel when you look at me. The attraction, the curiosity, the growing affection. It's beautiful, but also concerning." Lucas felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable. I know interspecies relationships are complicated." "Not uncomfortable," Echo said quickly. "Wonderful, because I experience similar feelings when I'm near you." "But Lucas, there's something you don't understand about empathic Luminians." "Tell me." Echo's form grew more solid, more defined, as they focused their energy. "We don't just sense emotions, we absorb them, integrate them into our own emotional landscape. The more time I spend with you, the more your feelings become part of me." "Is that dangerous?" "Potentially. If I absorb too many foreign emotional patterns, I could lose my connection to Luminian collective consciousness. I could become isolated." Lucas understood the implications immediately. Like falling in love with a human could cut you off from your own people. "Yes, and yet," Echo's form brightened despite their concerns, "the emotions I absorb from you feel more real, more vibrant than anything I've experienced through collective harmony." They stood in silence for a moment, both understanding the magnitude of what Echo was describing, love that could literally transform them, but at potentially enormous cost. "What do we do?" Lucas asked finally. "I don't know," Echo admitted, "but I think we're about to find out. The negotiations are failing, Lucas. I can feel the deeper currents beneath the surface: politeness, fear, mistrust, ancient prejudices. On both sides, without some kind of breakthrough, these talks will collapse within days. And if they do," Echo's form darkened, "both our species return to their separate paths. The humans continue their expansion, the Luminians retreat deeper into isolation. We lose this chance for understanding, possibly forever." Lucas felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not just for the negotiations, but for what was growing between him and Echo. "Then we better find a way to make this work," he said, reaching toward Echo's energy form. All of it. When their contact was made, Lucas felt a rush of sensation, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Not just Echo's emotions, but their entire way of perceiving reality. For a moment, he understood what it felt like to exist as living energy, to sense the emotional resonance of everything around him. "Did you feel that?" Echo whispered, their form pulsing with amazement. "I felt everything," Lucas replied. "Echo, what if that's the answer, not just for us, but for the negotiations? What if the breakthrough everyone needs is learning to actually feel what the other side experiences?" Echo's form blazed with sudden hope. "An empathic bridge. You could help the humans understand Luminian emotional reality, while I help my people experience human individual consciousness. It's dangerous," Lucas said. "For both of us." "All the best things are," Echo replied, their hand tendrils intertwining with his fingers. "But Lucas, if we succeed, we don't just save the negotiations. We prove that love really can bridge any gap." As alarms suddenly began sounding throughout the station, They both realized that their time for gradual solutions had just run out. Something had gone wrong with the negotiations, and now they would have to risk everything to prevent the civilizations from walking away from each other forever. The emergency assembly hall aboard Serenity Station buzzed with crisis, as representatives from both species gathered in response to the security alerts. Lucas Park stood with Echo near the central platform, watching as delegates filed in with expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. The Luminian High Council has issued an immediate recall order, announced High Resonator Scythe, their crystalline form pulsing with agitated reds. All Luminian vessels are to withdraw from this sector within 6 hours. Ambassador Williams stepped forward, her face pale but determined. The Earth Federation cannot accept responsibility for cultural insults we didn't intend to commit. If the Luminian delegation chooses to withdraw, we respect that decision. Lucas felt Echo's form dim beside him as they absorbed the waves of disappointment and frustration emanating from both sides. 6 months of careful negotiation were about to collapse over a misunderstanding that could have been resolved with better communication. "Wait," came a familiar voice from the crowd. Natasha Wells pushed through the assembled diplomats, her botanical uniform still stained with soil from her work in the greenhouse. Beside her, Zephyr's luminescent form cast gentle rainbows across the nearby walls. "We need to tell them," Natasha said to Zephyr, her voice carrying across the hall, "about what we've learned. What we've discovered is possible." Zephyr nodded, their form brightening with nervous determination. "Fellow Luminians, honored humans, we ask permission to address this assembly." Ambassador Williams looked puzzled but gestured for them to continue. "Dr. Wells, you have the floor." Natasha stepped onto the central platform, her hand finding Zephyr's luminous fingers. The simple gesture sent ripples of shock through both delegations. 6 months ago, I came to this station to study botanical compatibility between our species. Natasha began. "What I discovered instead was something that challenges every assumption both our peoples have made about the impossibility of true interspecies connection." "The hybrid gardens you've been working on?" asked Dr. Peterson from the human delegation. "Not just the plants," Zephyr said, their voice carrying harmonics of profound emotion. "We have discovered that beings from different worlds can form bonds that transcend biological limitations. We have found what humans call love and what Luminians call perfect resonance." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs from both sides. Several Luminian delegates began flashing angry colors, while human representatives exchanged worried glances. "That's impossible," declared another Luminian observer. "Resonance can only occur between beings of compatible harmonic frequencies." "We thought so too," came a new voice as Diego Rivera entered the hall, followed by a shimmering figure of pure musical energy. "Until we learned that love creates its own frequency." Melody's form pulsed with gentle melodies as she spoke. "Diego Rivera has taught me that harmony doesn't require identical voices, but rather different voices learning to sing together. This is why the negotiations are failing," Echo said, stepping forward with Lucas. Their empathic abilities painted the air around them with visible emotion. "Both sides are approaching this as a political and economic alliance. But what's really happening is something much more fundamental." Lucas nodded, understanding flooding through him. "We're not just two species trying to coexist. We're two ways of being conscious, two approaches to existence, discovering that they can complement rather than compete." From another entrance, Jasmine Chen arrived with Prism, their combined presence creating new patterns of light and shadow in the hall. "We've been creating art together," Jasmine announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was, revealing human permanence and Luminian temporality, working together to produce beauty neither could achieve alone. "And this matters because?" Ambassador Williams asked, though her expression suggested she was beginning to understand. "Because it proves that integration doesn't require assimilation," Prism said, their energy form dancing with excited colors. "We can remain distinctly ourselves while creating something entirely new together." Echo moved to the center of the platform, their form beginning to glow with accumulated emotional energy from everyone in the hall. "I can feel what each of you is experiencing right now," they said, their voice carrying new authority, the fear, the wonder, the hope, the resistance. Both species are terrified of losing their identity, but what these couples have discovered is that love expands identity rather than diminishing it. You're asking us to base interspecies policy on romantic relationships? High Resonator Scythe asked, their form flickering with confusion. We're asking you to base policy on connection itself. Lucas replied, these relationships aren't anomalies, they're examples of what becomes possible when we stop seeing difference as threat and start seeing it as opportunity. Natasha stepped forward again, her voice carrying the confidence of months spent nurturing impossible growth. In our greenhouse, Earth orchids are blooming in harmony. With Luminian resonance crystals, the plants aren't becoming less Earth-like or less Luminian, they're becoming more themselves, more vibrant, more alive. The communication between our fleets has improved dramatically since Diego and I began translating for each other, Melody added, her musical tones weaving through the air. We've prevented dozens of misunderstandings by bridging the gap between verbal and harmonic expression, and our collaborative artwork has inspired dozens of other artists from both species. Jasmine said, gesturing toward Prism, cultural exchange doesn't dilute culture, it enriches it. Echo's form was now blazing with the emotional energy of the entire assembly, human hope and Luminian wonder creating new patterns of light. What you're all feeling right now, Echo announced, this mixture of fear and possibility, anxiety and excitement, this is what change feels like. This is what growth feels like. Ambassador Williams looked around the hall, then at High Resonator. Scythe, perhaps we need to reconsider the framework of these negotiations entirely. Indeed, Scythe replied, their crystalline form cycling through thoughtful blues and greens. If individual connections are possible, then perhaps collective cooperation is not just feasible but inevitable, not inevitable. Zephyr corrected gently, chosen. Love is always a choice to see possibility instead of limitation, to build bridges instead of walls. Lucas felt Echo's energy tendrils intertwine with his fingers, and suddenly he could sense what everyone in the hall was experiencing, the gradual shift from fear to curiosity, from resistance to openness. So what do we do now? Asked Dr. Peterson. We start over, Lucas said, the answer coming to him with perfect clarity, not with trade agreements and territorial negotiations, but with cultural exchange programs, interspecies education initiatives, and opportunities for our peoples to discover what these 5 couples already know, that love isn't limited by biology, Diego added, that art transcends species boundaries, Jasmine continued, that growth happens best when different approaches support each other, Natasha said, that harmony includes dissonance that resolves into something beautiful, Melody sang, and that understanding isn't just possible, it's transformative, Echo finished, their form now radiating joy that touched every being in the hall. 6 months later, the first Interspecies Cultural Center opened on Serenity Station, with permanent facilities for botanical research, artistic collaboration, communication studies, mediation training, and empathic exchange programs. Young beings from both species came to learn from each other, to explore the possibilities that 5 couples had discovered through love. And in the center of it all, a garden grew where impossible flowers bloomed, tended by hands both human and Luminian, reaching always toward the light that connected different worlds into one beautiful, diverse galaxy.